Alright, so let's take a look at the box office from this past weekend. Oh, eagle-eyed viewers who have been following the show will notice I've changed up the box office grab chart here. Up to this point, I've been just taking a screenshot of Box Office Mojo, but I've been yearning for some more details, and also to give you, like, because I'll talk about certain things that aren't in the screenshot, so I figured let's have this now where you can see everything that I'm talking about, and hopefully it maybe enhances your experience. So let's take a look at the box office from this past weekend. Total box office was $126 million, which was a slight dip. Let me see if I have the exact percentage here. A slight dip, because basically for 3 weeks in a row, it was like $150 million for the weekend. So this is about a 19-20% drop from where we were at last weekend. But still very good considering the malaise that the American box office has been in for basically the entire calendar year and even going back into 2023. So opening this week, I mean, a big surprise here. We have at number 2, Longlegs, the horror film distributed by Neon. I had projected this was going to come in around 6 to 10 million. And I, for once, wasn't even going against conventional wisdom because there wasn't really many people making box office predictions for this film. But that seemed like a safe bet because Neon films usually don't open particularly big. But this opened at about $23 million for the weekend. Which, again, is not a lot, but considering it wasn't expected to make a bunch, that's really exciting to see. It was in about 2,500 theaters this past weekend, and it had a per-theater average of $9,000 or so, which is really, really good. Because if you see, it's just a little bit below Despicable Me 4's per theater average, right? Now, it has, 2,000 more theaters, but the per theater, its ability to perform well on an individual screen is evident here, right? And that includes, this opening weekend number includes its domestic and worldwide total. And supposedly it was only made for about $10 million. So if you see over here, I'm going to start having in green if it's doubled its budget. Right, because usually the good rule of thumb is if a film, in order to break even, a film needs to double its budget and its gross because marketing and advertising are included in the budgetary number. So this has already crossed that threshold in its first weekend, being 126% return, right? So very exciting for a film that I've heard is pretty good. I've heard some really great things about it. But it hasn't been universal praise by any stretch of the imagination. But I'm planning on seeing it this Wednesday if the weather breaks a little bit. If it's 90 degrees, I'm not going. It's just too hot for me in New York to be commuting to these movies on the subway and then walking. Also opening this weekend, at number 5, we have Fly Me to the Moon, which is kind of like a historical romantic comedy about the moon landing, or I think maybe about faking the moon landing. I'm not quite sure. I really saw no promotion of this. I had projected this was going to come in anywhere from 12 to 17, and it actually kind of fell below those projections. It only made about 10 million for the weekend. So, 12 to 17 is not great to see, and it didn't even meet that threshold, right? And it wasn't like it was a limited release either. It was in, over 3,300 theaters, and it had a pretty paltry per theater average of just below 3,000 per theater, right? This brings its, that includes its domestic total. This brings its total worldwide to 19 million off of a $100 million budget. That's insane. I would imagine a lot of that is going to the cast, right? Because you have Channing Tatum and Scarlett Johansson and I think a few other big names kind of littering the cast there. So as you can see, it is far, far from making back its budget. But right now it's a negative 81% return. So, unless it has a huge breakthrough, this one might be a bomb, not even a flop. I'm calling it now. It's a bomb. Also continuing this week at number 1, holding its first place spot in its second frame is Despicable Me 4, bringing in just under 45 million for the weekend, which amounts to about a 41% drop. It was, actually added 21 theaters to its run, bringing it to about 4,500 theaters with about $10,000 per theater average. this one has just been performing really well, even just in 2 weeks, right? So this brings its total domestic total to about 211 million, and then worldwide about 438 million, off of just a $100 million budget. So it has definitely passed that doubling your budget threshold. This has proven again. I think I saw a stat that it was like between the 4 Despicable Me movies and then the 2 Minions movies, we've spent about $8 billion as a society going to see these movies, these Minions movies, this franchise's movies in theaters. So I thought that was an interesting stat there. Again, I've never been a huge fan of these movies, but kids fucking love them. Kids, it's like Minions is such a strong brand to the point where it's like their Mickey Mouse. So like anytime you go see any Illumination movie, the little Minions are part of like the Illumination little logo intro thing. So this just reinforces that Illumination really is just a Minions factory, and because a lot of their other films just haven't quite hit. With the big exception, of course, being Super Mario Bros. Right? Secret Life of Pets had a moment, and then it's definitely kind of lost its cultural cachet. But Super Mario obviously was already a powerhouse, and now the movie side of things is now a huge deal, right? Also continuing at number 3, we have Inside Out, dropping from 2nd to 3rd in its 5th frame, and it brought in just a humble. About $21 million. This constitutes about a 32% drop from where it was last week. So the fact that this is still like in the top 5 or top 3, right? After being in theaters for 5 weekends now, just goes to show that it's just been a powerhouse, right? It's actually added 55 theaters from the previous weekend, bringing it to about 3,800 theaters, about $5,500 per theater average, which is fine, right? I mean, more than fine, but again, it's in its 5th week, so that's not ridiculous, right? This brings its domestic total to about $573 million, and its worldwide total to $1.35 billion. Again, just off of a $200 million budget. So even though this is like one of the more expensive movies out right now, it is easily the most successful. This is like looking here at the chart, it's almost a 600% rate of return, right? So it is just the train that keeps on going, right? It'll be interesting if we see it still in the top 10, in its 8th weekend, in its 12th weekend. That would be really, really, really impressive. But we'll just have to wait and see. Also continuing, we have at number 4, A Quiet Place. Day 1, dropping from 3rd to 4th in its 3rd frame, bringing in just a little under $12 million. This was about a 43% drop. It actually removed about 300 theaters, so it's only about 3,300 theaters for the weekend, and it had a per theater average about $3,500. This brings its domestic total to about $116 million and $221 million worldwide, off of just a $67 million budget. So again, this is not like a gangbusters kind of movie, but that's like 230% rate of return. So this is, definitely validated Paramount's decision to continue this franchise, and not only continue it, but basically retain nothing from the originals except the premise. It's like a new cast, it's a prequel, so it's like not even the same kind of movie. It's like I actually have my review that's going to be coming out tomorrow, and I kind of described it, the difference between the originals were post-apocalyptic and this one is apocalyptic, right? It's more of a disaster movie, and trying to wrestle with that initial onset of the disaster. But again, so it's cool to still see it in the top 5 here. Also continuing now, I just want to highlight a few films that, have been, in the top 10 for more than a month, right? So we still have Bad Boys Ride or Die, dropped from 5th to 6th, in its 6th frame, though, right? Bringing in $4.4 million for the weekend, which is about a 34% drop from where it was last time, and it's had about a $2,000 per theater average. This brings its domestic total to about $185 million for the weekend, and $378 million worldwide. And again, not off of a ridiculous budget. I think it's about $100 million, right? So again, Hollywood, I've said this a million times, but I gotta keep saying it, that Hollywood always learns the wrong lessons, right? So, this summer is proving, whereas last summer, seemed to suggest that audiences wanted more original things with Oppenheimer and then Barbie. And Barbie's weird because obviously it's a brand. It's not, but it was not like a sequel to a earlier movie. This summer box office season is really reinforcing. Don't be creative. Don't take risks. Make sequel, reboot, prequel, whatever you have to do, and audiences will come. I think that's all here. I guess the only other thing opening, we do have like a Bollywood movie called Indian 2. I literally know next to nothing about this. I tried to find out about it, and it just squeaked its way into the top 10 at number 10, making about 1.2 million for the weekend. It was only in about a little over 500 theaters. So again, it didn't make a huge splash at the box office, but it's definitely like, again, it speaks to the disparity that they're not like. A foreign film is in the United States domestic top 10, right? It goes to show that it's not saying that the domestic films that are out are not being successful. It's just very bloated, right? So you have like Despicable Me 4 and Inside Out 2 and these films that like are pulling so many dollars to themselves, which kind of pulls everything away from all the other domestic releases here, like Kevin Costner's epic western Horizon, which we'll talk about later. Maxine, Sound of Hope, which is like a faith-based film. It's kind of pulling away those dollars, so then Indian 2 can kind of swoop in there and, kind of do a little bit of counter-programming. Viviana Metzger writes in the chat, really love the new chart setup. It's a lot easier to visualize what you're talking about with all these numbers. LOL. Thank you. Okay. It took me like half an hour to do this at work, so I appreciate it. Because, of course, I work full-time at another job, so I do this for the love of